A leader's ability to regulate their emotions and demonstrate optimism and empathy has a direct impact on trust, collaboration, and success across an organisation. Welcome to today's episode of Lead Well with Jackie, where we are joined by the marvellous Dr Sue McNamara to talk about the importance of individual emotional intelligence and its impact on those around us. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you so much, Jackie. My pleasure.
Sue is a strategic leader, executive coach, and corporate consultant specialising in emotional intelligence, or EQ, leadership development, and organisational transformation. As the Regional Director of 6 Seconds Asia Pacific, she leads initiatives that embed learnable, measurable, and scientifically grounded EQ skills into businesses, enabling leaders and teams to drive performance, engagement, and sustainable success. So I'd love to tell us about you, and I'd love to hear from you. Why EQ? What got you into this world?
Well, that's a really interesting question, actually, Jackie. So in my life, I've had various professions. And from the very beginning, where I worked in a shipyard with Trident weapons systems, and then I went from there into the travel industry, and then I went into hospitality, and then I went into education and psychology and all of these things. I noticed in all of these roles all around the world, in many, many different countries, I noticed that some people were more successful than others. And I thought, what is this? Why is this? Across all these industries, diverse industries, across all of these countries, different continents, there's something that's constant about these people who are successful. So when I had children, when we have children, we want to do the best that we can for those children. And when they were about 3, my youngest was 3, I thought, I really need to figure out what this was. And it had continued. And so I researched various different areas for my PhD to see what this was. And I found this thing called emotional intelligence. And I just went along unsuspecting on the 6 Seconds EQ practitioner cert. And I thought, I'll do this for my research. And then that will be it. And then anyway, I was hooked. I just thought, wow. So this emotional intelligence is correlated with well-being, quality of life, relationships, and effectiveness. And this is what it was. These people have great relationships in the workplace and outside. They had great balance, were successful at what they focused on. And I thought, this is it. And so that was me 20 odd years ago, and I've never left. I'm still here.
Wow. It really is an example of kind of falling down the rabbit hole, isn't it? That curiosity. It really makes me think of Alice in Wonderland. You know, she's really curious and, oh, what's that rabbit doing? And now you're still in that amazing world.
Absolutely. And that's what it's like. And I think, remaining curious has really been the key. And yeah, and I think that's another component, actually. People with higher levels of emotional intelligence that I've found in all these different countries was they're curious. They're not judgmental. And so that was something, these skills were something that I wanted to model to my children first and foremost, was the reason that I got into emotional intelligence, because just seemed to answer so many questions about life and how to do this life.
Yeah, because when you're dealing with people, there are as many iterations of interactions as there are humans on the planet, really, aren't there? And it's interesting, you said that you've been doing this for 20-something years. Would you say you're still curious? Are you still learning, or?
Absolutely, 100%. I think the day that I stop being curious, it'll all be over.
Yeah.
I think for me, curiosity about people, curiosity about the science around emotional intelligence is always changing as well. The Yeah, just learning from other people. And no matter how long I've done this job, I learn every single day from the people that I interact with. And that's what makes it really so wonderful for me.
Yeah, I hear you. It's the reason that I started this podcast, to be honest with you. I always say to my eldest son, Henry, if you think you know everything, then you will never learn anything again.
No.
It's just that idea of maybe I don't know, and or maybe there's something else that I can learn. It would be so easy to do this for a quarter of a century and then go next. But I
Yeah,
love that
absolutely.
thirst for knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think that's great advice because nobody can know everything and it's impossible to become an expert in everything. And that's why I think also people that have the ability to collaborate and connect
Mm,
with other people are also people who are going to be successful in life. And by that I don't mean the people that are going to earn the most money. By that I mean the people that are going to look back on their life at the end of their days and say, I did this how I intended to do it.
that's why I love you, Sue. I didn't mention in the intro that you actually I would consider you as a mentor, and you taught me everything that I know about emotional intelligence so far. But it's just so interesting to hear you say that, because I say to clients all the time, the goal is that every night you go to bed and reflect on the day and say, I chose it. I
Yeah.
chose that. I chose my behaviors. I did
Mhm.
what I needed to do with intention. That's like the goal.
It couldn't agree more. And I think if you can do that every day, and maybe some days you don't show up exactly how you want to, and that's absolutely fine. That's what being human is about.
Mm-hmm.
But I think emotional intelligence supports us to have an insight into knowing that that wasn't how you wanted to show up. It wasn't aligned with your values. It wasn't aligned with how you want to interact with other people. And so you need to know, you need to be self aware that
Mm,
actually that wasn't how I wanted to show up. And then to reflect and to choose, what can I do better tomorrow?
mm.
So it's not about being perfect, it's about practicing every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a journey. You're never going to wake up and go, well, I'm emotionally intelligent now. All
Oh, I
done.
wish. I so
I know.
wish.
If only. If you could crack the code on that one.
I just wish, yeah. When I did my PhD, I thought, I'm going to know so much about emotional intelligence. Theoretically, you can ask me any question, but if you ask me, did I show up 100% today or 100%, yesterday? I'll say, no, probably not. I've
Mm,
probably still got some reflection. I've probably got, actually, not even probably not, no. No, I've got some reflection to do, but how can I make that better today?
So, Sue, what is EQ? Like,
And so there's two answers to that. I could give you my 90,000 word thesis to read, or I can sum it up in a sentence.
I will go with door B, please.
And that is being smarter with your emotions or being smarter with your feelings. People use emotions and feelings interchangeably. There is a difference, but it's just being smarter about those things.
And what does that look like? What does it mean to be smarter with them? Does it mean to,
Mm.
self-analyze? Does it mean counseling? Like, how does that
Yeah.
look in real world?
Yeah, no. I mean, I think that it's really just about treating emotions very simply as pieces of data. So just
Mm,
like intellectual intelligence, we learn maths, we learn reading, we learn writing, and we learn that through various means, either through learning numbers, how numbers fit together, and then what we can do with those numbers. And it's the same with emotional intelligence. We learn to identify this data that
Mhm.
we all have in our bodies, that are these emotions are released in response to any stimulus that comes into our brain throughout the day. And they are released into our bodies and they stick to every single cell in our bodies, these emotions, to give us a message. Now, if we're going to be emotionally illiterate,
Mhm.
then we would ignore those and we wouldn't get to learn the rules about those. Just as with letters, when you first start to read, you learn a, b, k, d in the English language, and then you start putting those letters together. You learn sight words about
Mhm.
them, and then you can start to use words intelligently. You can start to put these letters together to form words that you've never actually seen before, because you
Mm.
know the rules about how they go together. And then when you start communicating with people, you can communicate intelligently because you're choosing the words for the right moment. You're choosing and considering the emotional impact of the things that you do and you say. You're noticing the emotional impact that other people have on you or situations have on you. And so it really is just being aware of the data. So that's self-awareness. What am I
Mhm.
feeling at this point? What do I normally do with this emotion? What's my pattern around this? Then analyzing, and by analyzing, I don't mean sitting for 3 hours and analyzing this. I mean analyzing in the moment. Okay, what's the emotion telling me? What's the message that it's telling me?
Mm.
And um, you know, yeah, what have I done in the past with this emotion? What's my pattern? And then to say to yourself, okay, right, is this emotion appropriate for this moment in time? Is this emotion going to lead me and this other person to the outcome that we want? Or is it actually going to get in the way of what we truly want? And
Mm.
then to come up with a plan of how you can move forward with any given situation. So it's really linking your emotional intelligence, so being smarter with that emotional data, with being smarter with your intellectual data as well, putting those two things together, IQ plus EQ equals emotional intelligence, being emotionally smarter. And so that's really what emotional intelligence is. In a sentence, it's being smarter with your emotions.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people, you may have heard, I've certainly heard people say things like, "I'm just not emotional. I'm not an
Mm,
emotional person."
mm, mm.
And just when you were explaining that, it made me start to question: is that a lack of awareness?
Mm.
Is there an element of suppression there? Because you said this happens to everyone. Everyone releases emotion.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, anywhere, releases these chemicals, these neurohormones called emotions. And they work in the same way, unless there is fundamentally something clinical that's going to get in the way of that. But the job of emotions is to release these neurohormones, these chemicals into our bloodstream, to look to every single cell in our body that gives us a feeling. So when you're
Okay.
a bit concerned, a bit worried, a bit fearful, that's the job of the emotions.
Mhm.
If we feel happy, if we feel joyful, if we feel excited, our bodies feel lighter and uplifted, and that's the job of emotions. So it's you're receiving the message. What you choose to do with that message is really where the intelligence piece comes in. So you're either
Mm.
going to be smart with that or you're going to be idiotic with that. And so ignoring that is actually ignoring a really valuable piece of data. And you know, I think it's really interesting also what you just said with I'm just not emotional, or just let's keep emotions out of this. I
Mm,
think there's a lot of myths around emotional intelligence. And
mhm,
one of those myths is emotional intelligence doesn't mean you're emotional. It means that you are able to utilize this emotional data smartly. Some people who, as you've said, would describe themselves as over emotional, for example, it's probably that they're not reading the data at the moment for that context in the right way. So they might get emotionally hijacked, have this
mm,
amygdala hijack. And when that amygdala hijack occurs, your logic goes out of the window. So you're literally left with this emotion that's getting louder and louder and louder, releasing, releasing, releasing. So your emotion is escalating, escalating, escalating. And unless you receive that message, the emotion will continue to escalate.
So emotional intelligence is not a it's not actually about the release of the emotion as such, because you've touched on that there as well, that some people will say, oh, I'm really emotionally intelligent, I cry all the time.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, well, there's emotions there and they are there for all of us and they result in different feelings for different situations. But what I'm picking up here is that it's that almost critical analysis of what is the message? Is this emotion appropriate
Mhm.
for this situation?
Mhm.
And I think that's what you said, which was, and is it going to help myself and anyone else who's with me in this scenario move towards our desired outcome? Is it
Yeah,
useful? What am I going to do with it?
absolutely. And fundamentally, emotions have two purposes. There are emotions that move you towards something, and there are
Mhm,
emotions that move you away from something. So there are emotions that are going to, trigger that emotional hijack and cause the fight, flee, or freeze response. And those emotions are saying, get away from this situation. It is dangerous.
mhm,
Now, that worked when we were cavemen and women, when we needed to run away from a saber toothed tiger.
mhm,
But that fight, flee, or freeze response can be triggered by somebody else. For example, in the workplace, could be triggered by an employee, it could be triggered by a leader, it could be triggered by somebody, but it's fundamentally the same response. So I
mhm,
think that's why we can't leave emotions out of it, because if we did, it would be an absolute disaster. We can't have emotions just flooding through our bodies wildly without actually receiving these messages and using those messages smartly.
mhm.
Because again, we would just maybe, as you said, run around crying all day or getting, angry all day, or and that's not, at the end of the day, like we said at the beginning, it's not sitting down at the end of the day and saying, I showed
Mm,
up how I wanted to. It's just
yeah.
going to be this sludgy, swampy mess of
Yeah.
chemicals. where we sit there and we go, what happened?
It sounds exhausting, doesn't it? And also for the people around you, because that really highlights the contagion of these emotions, which I want to talk about in a moment. But first, I wanted to really reiterate a point that I think is really critical that a lot of people miss. There are not good or bad emotions.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people say leave, when they say leave emotion out of it, what they mean is let's leave the uncomfortable, move away from emotions out of it, because we don't want people to feel fear or frustration or any of those. We want people to move toward. So we want, those feelings of engagement and positivity and joy. And so I just wanted to really highlight that we're not talking about good and bad emotion, because we there is no moral attribution to an emotion. It's
No,
data.
it is just simply data or data. Yeah.
Data. I can't bring myself to say data. I do try, but I feel like a fraud.
All. It's just simply information. that
Yeah.
is given to us from this source that has been designed to keep us alive, to keep us safe. And we need to
Mm.
be smart with that. And we need to feel those things. We need to feel fear. We need to feel frustration. We need to feel anxious about things because it's giving us a message. It's pointing us in the direction of what is important. And in our brains, the area for emotion, there in the area for emotion is also memory and attention.
Mhm.
So the emotion that you are basically receiving will be pointing your attention in a certain direction, and it will be stored in the same place in your brain as these memories. So when a stimulus comes in, your brain can interpret it really quickly and say, is this a danger? Yes, it's a danger. Jump out the way, run away from it.
Mm.
But what we do now, we don't need to run away or we don't need to fight something, but we're basically going back into patterns that my fight response might be to say something really aggressive to try and protect myself at some level.
Mhm.
Or my freeze response might be, I'm just going to give you the silent treatment.
Mm.
And so it's quite interesting, I think, the way in which we now, in the modern day, interpret what used to be run away, stand still, and hopefully it won't see me, or fight it.
Mm. And having it be so close, I guess, physiologically to our memory center, is that is what's the connection between memory or lived experience and the emotion that I'm experiencing in the present moment?
Yeah. So, Jackie, if I asked you to think about, a leader that you've had who is absolutely a fabulous leader, who would
Mhm.
that be? You don't need to say their names, but can you recall that person?
Yes.
So you recall that person because that's a memory that is creating and generating an emotion that is saying, I enjoyed working with that person. I, didn't want to really leave that job,
Mhm.
they're emotions that are saying, this is safe. This is a
Mhm.
psychologically safe person. This is a place in which I want to be. Likewise, if I said to you, can you remember a boss or a teacher
Yes.
that had
Sure
this?
can, True.
See, can you actually see how your body language changed then as well? And that's the job of emotions. It's saying, do not go anywhere near that person. Just,
Mm.
you have to. Say if you're in the workplace and you have a leader who is having this impact on you, then you go in, you do what you need to do, and then you get out. You will not go
Yeah.
beyond. You will not get that engagement. You will not get that passion. None of those things. So
Mm.
that's why memory is in the same area as emotion and attention. Attention for survival, really, and to kind of what do I really need to pay attention to here? Plus, if we think of emotion and motivation, they're very interlinked. So
Mhm.
the word emotion and motivation comes from the same root word, to move, the Latin word to move. So we're either going to generate emotions in ourselves and in those people around us to move them towards something,
Mhm.
or we're going to generate emotions or contribute to them generating emotions that is going to move them away from it. So, as leaders, we need to be very aware of what emotion am I actually feeling myself? Because emotions are contagious, as you said. And also, what emotion are the people around me feeling? And is that
Mhm.
emotion the emotion that is going to be useful to motivate them to move towards whatever it is we're working towards?
So it is data/data.
Yes, it
And
is.
it's also a tool. When we talk about emotional intelligence in leadership, what I'm hearing from what you've just shared is, one, as the leader in the group or is in the room, I need to be emotionally intelligent and aware of how I am handling, managing, navigating the emotions that are coming up for me,
Mm.
because my emotional response is going to have an impact on the emotional response of my team. And then the other way around is, and also what emotional response is going to be most motivating for the team that I'm leading, and how do my behaviors incite that? Is
Mhm.
that fair? Is that kind of the two sides of the coin?
Absolutely spot on. We have these neurons in our brain called mirror neurons, whose job it basically is to pick up and receive information from other people. And as a leader, we have an inherent type of perceived power in some way. And so, as a leader, this emotional contagion, these
Mm,
mirror neurons pick up on things like facial expressions, tone of voice, body language, and they're reading the room constantly, to kind of pick up these things from other people. So if as a leader you're walking into the office in the morning and you are grumpy and you are agitated, or if you're frustrated, then what will happen is the people around you will pick up on those cues to give
mm,
them information to say, do we approach? Do we stay away? Do we? And if we're giving out those emotions that are saying, stay away from this person, if you can imagine if there's something that really needs attention and you've got employees actually avoiding you because
mm,
of the way that your emotions are contagious to them, then it's not going to be very successful.
mm,
And it's not just about being nice all the time. Sometimes you will be frustrated. Sometimes you will be um, upset about things. And that's absolutely perfectly fine. But it's the way in which you communicate that
mm,
data, it's the way in which you um, interact with your employees around that. And sometimes they might need to be frustrated if something's not working well. Frustration's great. It's saying, hey, find another way to do this. But
mhm.
as a leader, what's important is that we model higher levels of emotional intelligence so that people around us learn from that. They would never not come to us if there was a problem, for example. Um, and that forms closer team relationships and bonds as well.
Yeah, okay. So it's almost more important within a team dynamic that the leader is emotionally intelligent and demonstrates that emotional intelligence, because the rest of the team will actually mirror or pick up on those
Mhm.
emotionally intelligent behaviors, even not even at a conscious level.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Amazing.
absolutely. No, it really is. And I think that's, with my research, that's what I was really interested in, particularly in anybody that's in that situation where, like a parent, a teacher, a leader, um,
Mhm.
it's going to kind of have more of an impact on other people around us. So that's why, a lot of my research was about if you enhance your own emotional intelligence and you display more emotionally intelligent behaviors, then what happens to the people around you who have had no emotional intelligence training at all? They don't know
Mm,
anything about it, but you have, and you increase your emotional intelligence. What actually happens? Just purely on you modeling these behaviors. And I was astounded. I thought it would have some difference, but I was absolutely astounded at the impact that it actually did have just
mm.
through one person in a family or one person in a classroom. Um, displaying more emotionally intelligent behaviors, the people around them increased their social emotional behaviors as well. It's
It's
phenomenal.
so it is, and I think that that really drives home an important point, because a lot of the time if I'm working with an individual, a lot of the time they'll say, I'm doing everything I can, but it's a drop in the ocean compared to the organizational culture that I'm working with. I even was working with someone today, and they were saying, you know, I'm affecting this change and I'm starting to see momentum in my own behavior, but I'm noticing how much, you know, needs to change more broadly. And
Mm.
it makes me think of when I first started my EQ journey with you many years ago. And what I noticed is that in my organization, I was the only one that was doing it. People
Mm.
started coming to me and saying things like, "Oh, Jackie, I've got to have a really hard conversation with a team member.
Mm.
Would you mind just talking to me and talking about how I might be able to have that conversation?" Because they would say things like, "Because you're good at this stuff."
Yeah.
Or I'm gonna have a workshop. This person had inherited a really fragmented team, and I want to have a workshop. Could we spend some time just talking about what you think might help these people to start to build trust again?
Yeah.
And it was, I really saw that what you're saying firsthand in terms of when I started to demonstrate more emotional intelligence in my day-to-day life, it people were drawn to it and noticed it
Yeah.
and wanted to do it themselves.
Absolutely. And, what we find is that sometimes people call it soft skills as well.
Oh, it drives me bonkers. Are you okay with it? Because every time I hear soft skills, I just think, no, it's
I, I,
actually really hard.
I don't actually know what's soft about it, to be honest with you. And we can measure it. We can measure this. So it's measurable, it's learnable, and it's actionable. And we can measure the results as well of the actionable part of it. So we can measure it, all those points, but we can measure the outcomes. For example, we're here today talking about leadership.
Mhm.
If your emotional intelligence, you have higher levels of it and you're actioning it. So not just that you've got higher EQ, but that you're actually utilizing it is really important. Then we can measure those outcomes. You're better able to motivate people as a leader, uh,
Mm,
or change, bring people through a change process, engage people in that change process. You're better able to not only do your own job as a leader to execute things, but to bring other people in because, we can't do this job alone. And
mhm,
so bringing people together as a team is another component that has, is really impacted by higher levels of emotional intelligence, like you said, because people feel more connection, they feel more joy, they feel more engaged, more passionate. And so we need all of these things. And kind of at the center of all that is leaders with higher emotional intelligence actually evoke more trust because trust is actually emotion as well. So
mm,
if you've got those things, high levels of motivation, high levels of teamwork, higher levels of execution, i.e., getting the job done, you're better able to navigate and pivot change, and you've got trust, then you're going to have these better outcomes. And we can measure it by looking at the bottom line. You know,
mm,
an organization might say to us, look, we want to increase our bottom line by 10%. Okay, let's start with your people.
mm,
So this is really starting with people and recognizing that an organization or a team is nothing without people. It wouldn't exist without people. And a leader's job, I see it as being the conductor of the orchestra. And
mhm,
and we know that having higher levels of emotional intelligence allows them to do those things that I've just mentioned to bring about, you know, things like increased profits and lower staff turnover, for example. So there are so many different ways in which this impacts that have an inherent kind of visceral response when I hear the word soft
me
because it's
too.
not.
Mm. So, is are we born with EQ,
Mm, mm.
Because I know you said, that it's measurable, it's teachable, it's learnable, all of these attributes. Is it easier for some of us than others? Is it easier for some genders, some cultures? Talk to us about that,
Yeah,
please.
yeah, absolutely. So, emotional intelligence is it's not something that you are born with a specific level of and you can't increase it. So it's been shown, I believe, that intellectual intelligence, you are born with a certain kind of ceiling, if you like. It's
Mhm.
not the same with emotional intelligence. With emotional intelligence, you can actually continue to develop your emotional intelligence every single day. And in terms of it's more difficult for some people than others, yes, I would think so, would be the answer to that, because for some people it might be there's at different starting points.
Mhm.
And some people are maybe introverted, so it's harder for them maybe to connect with other people. But those people who are naturally introverted might have higher empathy levels, which is a component of maybe the extroverts do. I don't know. So it's really no one
Oh.
size fits all, I think, Jackie. But I think the important thing is we all have emotions and we can all learn to be smarter with those emotions. And it's not about a prescription, about being robotic in how you show up. It's about being you. You're the expert in you. You have that wisdom within you, and
Mm.
you find a way to integrate emotional intelligence into you so that you show up authentically. Because there's nothing worse in leadership than being inauthentic either.
Yeah. Because I think that is, well, I don't know how to phrase it, but that is also kind of contagious in terms of if someone's being inauthentic, we can smell it. You can pick it a mile off. So
100%.
EQ skills are not necessarily something that we're born with or that we're born with a ceiling. I'm
Mm,
wondering if there is an element of, as you said, if we've had leaders or parents who have a higher EQ, then our mirror neurons may have picked up some of these skills
mhm.
naturally throughout our lived experience. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's really what my research was looking at. It was looking at behaviors when we measured people's emotional intelligence levels, and then we asked qualitative questions around what the impact of those were.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw that the impact of certain behaviors on people around you weren't really getting you the results that you wanted. They were also causing frustration and they were causing some disconnection, etc. So then when we went through this series of workshops that was designed to enhance the individual's emotional intelligence and for them to go out and just do it,
Uh-huh.
um, what we found was when we remeasured that emotional intelligence had gone up because of the intervention, but not just because of the intervention, because those individuals were choosing to use and action their emotional intelligence. What
Uh-huh.
we found was the social emotional behaviors of those around them changed. And that included, people in the workplace that people were interacting with that had noticed, um, partners, parents, in laws, children.
Ooh.
So it's really quite incredible. And I think it makes us really accountable for how we show up,
Mhm.
because we are either supporting or not supporting other people's emotional intelligence through our own utilization of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I always think of this as the ripple effect. And I think that the beginning part, like you said, self-awareness is the first sort of foray into emotional intelligence. And I know from my own experience, part of that was realizing that emotions aren't just something that are happening inside of me. My emotions are actually going to have an impact, and how I navigate them or not are going to have an impact on those around me, so that we are creating these
Mm,
ripples, right?
mm,
That and same the other way around, how I am impacted by the emotions of others.
yeah, absolutely. And you see, I think that's also a really interesting point is as a leader, um, our the people that we work with are going to come into work with many different emotions.
Mm,
And how you're able to navigate not just only your own emotional data, but also the data of those people around you and what you're actually experiencing from them will have an impact again on your outcomes as a leader.
absolutely. And that I do think it's worth really highlighting. It's bi-directional is the
Yes.
point, right? It's going both way. Emotions, whether it's at a conscious level or not, form part of how we interconnect and interrelate with the other human beings in our world.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're wired to connect these mirror neurons. So
Mm.
when we're born, we need to connect immediately. We need to
Hmm.
connect with our mother, we need to connect with our father in order to survive. And so these mirror neurons are there to help us to connect. And emotions are there to help us to connect intelligently, appropriately. And that's why it's not soft.
It's so hard. It is, and I think the it's almost like you were saying at the beginning, that kind of falling down the rabbit hole. The more you know, the more you realize that you don't know, or the more you have to learn, which is which is actually a really beautiful thing because, obviously I'm an EQ coach and I've spent the last few years bringing people on this journey, and you would see it all the time. So you see the click, like you see people go, oh, or they'll go away and come back and say, I just made this adjustment. I spoke to someone today. I've been working with him for a year, and he said to me, I have this person in my team who was impossible. No one liked working with him. I did A, B, and C. He goes, Jackie, I think I flicked a switch. He's
It's
amazing.
cool. Yeah.
He's so engaged. He does everything that he needs to do. People are laughing with him, enjoying spending time with him. And I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
like it's so impactful.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we know that as human beings, we have certain needs. So, as a leader, knowing what those needs are. So, I think what you just mentioned about, this curiosity. And if we think about emotional intelligence allows us as a leader to support change, not only in the organization or the team, but in individuals, because change equals growth. One of the basic fundamental needs of human beings is about growth. And so, just like you described with that person, they're growing in some way and they're being supported to do that by that leader. And it
Mm,
is a real aha moment. And in order to support anybody to do any of these things, to grow, for example, we need to evoke trust because trust is about psychological safety. It's an emotion that says, it's okay. It is safe to be in this space, about
mhm,
psychological and physical safety, really. And once a leader has got trust with their team or within their organization, then they can support people to grow in the way that you've just described. We've got this human need as well that we need to find meaning in things. So
mm,
again, just like that person you've just described, maybe through this leader shifting some behaviors, it's allowed the person to tap into something that he or she finds more meaningful, which is
mm.
motivation, comes from emotion. We're then generating those emotions to move us further towards something. And yeah, I think you also really, in what you were describing then, were talking about belonging as well.
Mm,
This person feels more connected and
mhm,
therefore feels this belonging because as human beings we had this inherent need to belong as
Mm,
well, and
mm,
achieve. So yeah, they're kind of the basic, really human needs. And just by a leader doing like you've just described, shifting a couple of things,
mhm.
showing up more emotionally intelligently, people feel heard, they feel connected, and then you can do, tap into those needs, their needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what he did. He really sat down and spoke to this person, heard what was important to them, made a couple of really minor adjustments, but
Yeah.
met them in that need state. And that leads me to ask you what behaviors are
Mm,
indicative of a high EQ leader at a
mm,
practical level? What would we see someone
mm.
with high EQ doing?
Yeah. So I think, the answer to that question is really, I'm going to ask you a question that is linked to that. So you remember the leader that you just said you loved working for?
Mhm.
What were their behaviors? What did they do?
Good question. You know, it's interesting actually because I'm still this person was my leader years ago. I'm still very good friends with them
Uh,
because we had mutual respect. They gave me feedback,
mhm,
supportive, constructive feedback.
mhm.
They listened attentively. You know, it was one of they were one of those leaders that I always felt that I could make mistakes
Yeah.
safely, and I
Yes.
always knew that they were going to challenge and stretch me in a supportive way.
Yeah.
That's how I would nutshell that particular leader.
Yeah. Absolutely. There we go. So these are the types of behaviors, really. And so if we think of um, that piece at the middle, what you just said was that you felt you could go to them even if you'd made a mistake.
Mhm.
And so I think that's to do with consistency. So
Mm,
our brains as human beings like consistency. So if you interacted with that leader on one day, that you would get the same on another day,
mhm,
despite whether they'd had a good day or not. And so when you know what you're going to get, so there's no kind of vagueness or how are they going to show up today? Can I go to them with this now? Or is it not a good time to go to them with this? That actually impacts trust
mhm,
negatively. So therefore, I think, one of those things that you just said was we've got this coherence in some way or consistency.
mm,
And also, I think, they care about you. They
mm,
truly care about you. You're not just a number. You're not just somebody coming into work. They actually, ask, "Oh, how's your baby?" Or "How's this?" Or "How's that?" Something beyond actually the workplace, so that you feel they actually care. They're
mm,
invested in you. And so, I think some of the behaviors around that are to generate that trust is authenticity, as we said,
mhm,
transparency as well. So, like you just said, you're held accountable. You're
mm,
not, and they could be a tough leader in that they want the best for you, but you truly believe they're doing this not for their own good or benefit, but they're doing this because they want you to grow. They
yep,
want you to, they want what is truly best for you. So I think, in terms of this motivation piece, leaders with high emotional intelligence trust themselves as well to
mhm,
give team members that autonomy. So to make mistakes sometimes, but they have that autonomy. You won't see a leader with high emotional intelligence levels micromanaging.
mhm,
They trust that you're going to do the job and you trust yourself that you are going to do the job. So there's that autonomy that they give you. So they'll give you those clear directions, so you're very aware of what you need to do, but they'll maybe check in, how's it going? Or they'll put things in the diary to say, let's check in a week to make sure you're on the right track, or to support them. But they give that autonomy, they trust, they give you a job, they get out the way, they let you do that job with the support that you actually need. That they know you, and they know what motivates you, they know what's important to you, so that they can kind of match what you're doing to create meaning. So they'll communicate not only the what, but the why and the
Hmm.
how. And they'll really give you those opportunities to grow as an individual as well. And I think everybody has egos, but leaders who have higher levels of emotional intelligence can kind of leave their egos at the door. I
Mm.
If I see people that are micromanaging, that have these really big egos, it's all about them. Oh, I achieved this rather than we achieved this. They're really
Mm.
some red flags. And we know human nature. We like that acknowledgement. Yes, intrinsic motivation, which is part of emotional intelligence, it's in the model, is about, that autonomy, that meaning, that mastery. However, you know, as a human need is also belonging. So
Mm.
a leader needs to take the time to be able to do that as well. Yeah, there's a
You
lot.
know, you know what you didn't say there that I
Oh,
want to really draw on is that you didn't say an emotionally intelligent leader is always nice,
mm,
always gives you compliments or fluffs you up, doesn't have challenging conversations. And when you were sharing, when you were summarizing that, it occurred to me that this leader that I was thinking was the first leader I've had that has given me challenging feedback.
mm-hmm,
And I remember leaving that conversation thinking, oh, that that was hard. That was hard to hear,
mm,
but she's 100% right. And I've never noticed that. And
mm,
that piece, that delivery of the feedback, not just how it was delivered, but the fact that it was delivered at all,
yeah.
made our working relationship and the way I saw her as my leader so much stronger.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a great point. Thank you so much for picking up on that, because it's another myth. It doesn't mean we have to go around being jolly and joyful, and because that's one emotion.
Yeah.
There are 3,000 names for emotions in the English language, 3,000 emotions. And so we need to be able to display those appropriately. That leader, if you think just that interaction that you just described, they would have had to probably navigate their own emotions because it was a difficult conversation. So that's a great example of a leader not being comfortable,
Hmm.
possibly thinking about how they're going to give you that challenging feedback. Um, so not only navigating their own emotions, but considering what's the emotional impact going to be. Now, they probably wanted you to feel a little bit concerned in that moment because there's something maybe not going quite right. So, do you want that person that you're giving this feedback to feel, oh, jolly and happy
Yeah.
and whatever?
Everything's great. I don't have to change anything.
Exactly, because that would be the message. I'm fine. So, what we're doing is we're giving a message in a way that is going to be respectful, that is going to use our empathy levels so that we can think about how we're going to give that feedback, not just about what the feedback is. And then to actually exercise our optimism and
Mm.
to give the person hope in a way that, yeah, okay, this might not be working out 100% as we had hoped at this moment in time. What are some options? Let's have a look at these options available to us now. So even, if it's kind of really challenging feedback that we've got to give, it's really exercising that realistic, I'm going to say realistic optimism, because optimism doesn't just, it's not just everything's going to be fine.
Mm,
It's, we need, I call it hope with a plan.
mm,
And that's what I think optimism is. So absolutely right. It means that you challenge people in order for them to grow, but you do it in a way that is appropriate at the right time, in the right setting, the right context, taking into account how it's being delivered, taking into account what you know of the other person as well. And if you've built that trust and they believe that you care, then when you give that feedback, they're going to be able to receive it in a way which is appropriate as well, as you,
mm.
like you did.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I might have even thanked her. But I really like that definition of optimism as hope with a plan, because in terms of leadership and in terms of feedback, it really reminds me how important it is as a leader to see potential in our
Mm,
team and
mhm,
not label people as, well, that is a difficult person, or that person's, yes, sometimes people will not be in the right role for them, or they might not be in the right environment, and that is a real thing. But
mm,
I do find that when I see more emotionally intelligent leaders, they do have that level of everything is figure outable. We can work through this together collaboratively
mm.
to get to a more favorable outcome, rather than, well, this person is just, put them in the bin, they're not up to
Yeah.
scratch.
Yeah. I love that word, figure outable.
Yeah, it's not mine, it's Mary Forleo's, but I really love it too.
I love it. And I think that's another thing as well, because it's like on the plane, where they say put your own oxygen mask on first. A
Mm,
leader really needs to, in order to show up in an emotionally intelligent way, particularly in a challenging situation, you need to have put your own oxygen mask on first. So you need to have developed your own emotional intelligence so that you can face these things in a balanced way, in a way that is not going to have you on this hamster wheel of a stress cycle where you're just worried, you're concerned, you're escalating, you're escalating, you're
mm,
escalating. Because if you, as a leader, are, halfway up the escalator and going up and up and up on a daily basis in the workplace, you're going to trip off that escalator at the top if you're not paying attention to it. So I think it's about working on your own emotional intelligence first. And in order to navigate your own stress, to get off that stress cycle, and that takes that self-awareness, that self-management, and to know why you're doing something, how it
mm,
connects with values, how it connects with other people as well. So
mm.
so I really do think it has to start with the leader before anything else.
Absolutely. And I'm going to ask you a really big question, which we could probably do a whole episode on, but this comes up all the time. This is a true story. I went for coffee with some of the mums from school the other day, and one of them texted me afterward. Oh no, sorry, in the coffee catch up, she said, "Oh, Jackie, I've been thinking about you. Talk to me about empathy." She said, "I've been having these conversations with people, and all I can think of is, I don't care. I'm stressed out too." And she's like, "How do I have empathy when I have this empathy fatigue?" And I just think, if you could articulate in your perfect, wonderful way, what is empathy? What is
Mm.
it? A lot of people think they have it.
Yeah, yeah. So it's and again, we could do a whole episode on it,
It's a big one.
and I'm happy to come back and talk about it. But
Oh, good. That was
fundamentally,
that was recording. She's coming back. Sorry.
I think fundamentally, we it's like emotional intelligence when we hear it. we have myths about emotional intelligence, but and myths about what empathy is. Sometimes, going back to your point before, people think empathy is just being nice all the time.
Yeah.
You know, oh, I'm just going to be nice to that. That's not really it. So, empathy, I would say there are three distinct parts to empathy, and we need all of these parts. So we have emotional empathy, which is being able to feel what the other person is feeling at some level. Then
Mm-hmm.
we have cognitive empathy, which is, that must be really difficult for them because of XYZ. And then we have this action empathy, which is sometimes known as compassionate empathy. And this is about what do I do in that situation? How do I show empathy? And that could just be, it doesn't have to be an action, that could simply just be somebody sitting with you,
Mm.
could just be somebody being silent. It could just be somebody validating what you're feeling, even if they don't agree with that. Just validating it. It could
Oh.
be, the many different things, but we need all three parts to have true empathy. Sometimes people are higher in one area and lower in another area. Sometimes it's easier for people in one specific area. Um, but empathy is those three things. And in the model around, in the 6 seconds model of emotional intelligence, empathy is not just about other people. Empathy is
Mm-hmm.
about yourself. So the mum you were talking to the other day, for example, it's like put your oxygen mask on first. What empathy
Mm-hmm.
are you showing yourself first? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you, eating healthily? Are you connecting with people? Because if we are, hungry, or if we're angry, if we're lonely, if we're tired, these are the times when we're most likely to get emotionally hijacked. And these are the times that we're most likely to become disconnected from other people around us as well. So,
Yeah. Okay.
empathy for herself in that case, as well as empathy for other people. And it's
Mm.
learnt competence as well. You're not
I think,
either empathic or not. You learn it.
yeah,
If
and it's a
Yeah.
scale, right?
It
You can,
is.
it's not sort of black and white, but it's interesting. So what I'm hearing is, first of all, when you're called upon to approach a conversation that requires empathy, maybe a checkpoint.
Mhm.
Am I in the best position that I can be? Is my oxygen mask on today or this morning for me to be able to have that conversation? Or is that a
Yes.
conversation that I need, or do I need to do a few things? Do I need to do a little bit of work before I'm ready to meet that person in empathy?
Mm.
And another thing that you mentioned that felt really really poignant, important, was around validating someone's emotion, even if you don't necessarily agree with it, or share that
Mm.
experience.
Yes.
Because what isn't empathy is saying, "Oh, I've been through that as well, and this is what I did to get through it,"
Yes.
or trying to ameliorate their emotion, their move away emotion, by saying, "Oh, well, at least this has happened, and at least you've got that."
Yes.
But it's sort of
Absolutely.
sitting with them in their emotion, whether you have a shared experience or not, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, there's nothing worse, is there, than when you're in a situation and somebody comes along and says that, because that's really disconnecting you from that person. And it's really an opportunity to connect.
Mm,
Really an opportunity to deepen that relationship as well, to bring about more trust. And you know yourself that when somebody um, you feel that somebody really understands you, then it forms that greater connection with them. And
mm,
that's really what empathy is. And it's really, really powerful.
mm. I remember when we were working on empathy, and Josh, who is the CEO of 6 Seconds, I remember he said, um, empathy is not don't just stand there, do something. Empathy is don't just do something, stand there.
Mm,
It
mm,
really imprinted on my brain because we have this desire to take away the tough, uncomfortable feelings for
yeah.
people. And it was a real important reminder of that's not what people need from us in terms of empathy. Sometimes they need for us to, as you say, just be with us on an emotional, cognitive, and action level. Just be
Yes.
there.
Yes, absolutely. It's no, being emotionally intelligent will give you the information as to what people really truly need, some of it, and then asking what people need in that moment as well. So, yeah,
Mm. That's an important point, actually. It's not about being an oracle and being able to read other people's emotion or predict them or guess. And I think that is, being emotionally intelligent doesn't mean that you're not Dumbledore. You're not floating around being the all wise person. Asking is actually okay. And in a lot of cases, a sign of EQ.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we're not fortune tellers. We can't, and we don't know the person. The person is the expert in them, no matter how well we know them.
Mm.
Could be a family member, but we really truly don't know inside. And so I think that that ability to be able to, and this comes back to curiosity, to be curious, keeps us
Uh-huh.
out of judgment, because when people feel judged, that gets in the way of empathy. And curiosity fuels empathy. So if we can be curious, that's going to lead us to ask, and it's going to lead us to um, connecting, and it's going to lead us to them thinking about, maybe the possibilities down the track, but maybe not. It could just be that they just want to sit there at that moment in time and really feel what they want to feel. And
Mm.
the higher our emotional intelligence levels, then the more able we are to do that without jumping in and asking a billion questions, and maybe just to sit there.
Yeah. And I think that is a really important lens through which to see any of these kind of challenging conversations as a leader. You are ready to have a conversation with someone or to show up when you first acknowledge that you don't have all of the information
Yes.
and you keep yourself out of that judgment so that you can lean into curiosity. And like
Mm,
we said right at the beginning, that's where you get to learn and open your own mind and improve, be a better, more emotionally intelligent person today than you were yesterday.
absolutely. Yeah, and that's the goal. It's not, as I say to people, it's not an EQ perfectionist, our certification. It's an EQ practitioner, which means that we continue to practice, we continue to grow. And
Mm.
that's the important thing in life. If you can continue to learn and to grow and to really make a positive impact in our own lives and other people's lives, then I think, that's a life truly well lived. And I think it's a great opportunity for leaders to be able to support that.
And ultimately make the world a better place, not to make it too big and impactful, but it is, if every individual strives to be better today than they were yesterday,
Hmm.
imagine those ripples.
The world would be an even better place.
And even better. I have a couple of final questions for you, Sue, if that's okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Any common myths or misconceptions around EQ that we haven't yet covered?
Yeah. So I think we've covered quite a lot of them. I think, some people think you're either born with it or you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not the case. They are learnable and actionable competencies. I think that is one that some people say, I'm just not emotionally intelligent, or I am emotionally intelligent. And so that's one. I think that, one of the other myths is about the soft skills. It's not
Mm-hmm.
soft. It's actually just being smart. We
Mm.
have lots of data points throughout the day. And it is, what do you do with these? Emotions are 80,000 times faster than our logic.
Oh,
That
it's amazing.
that spurt of emotional, the chemicals actually is happens in 0.25 of a second. So again, we can ignore it. But if we ignore it, then it's a dangerous thing down the track, I think, which leads to another myth of keep emotions out of it. It's
Mm.
impossible. You can't. Emotion and cognition, so thought and feeling, are interlinked.
Hmm.
And you can't really, when you look at, these neurons that are firing together, it's so challenging to separate them. And so, yeah, I think that that's another myth. You can't leave emotions out of it. It's impossible.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's a learnable competence.
So, what is one thing that we can all do today
Mm,
that will build or increase or enhance our EQ? What's the low hanging fruit?
mm. I think the low hanging fruit is noticing
Mm.
what you're feeling. So by feeling, I mean, notice those moments in the day where, you might be feeling a little bit anxious or stressed or worried about something, or notice those moments in the day where you're excited and joyful and happy. And what are the signals that this emotion is giving you? And then you can start to notice these signals in other situations as well. And then to name the emotion, to actually simply put a name to that emotion. Because what happens in your brain suddenly goes from, oh, what's happening here, to I know what's happening here. I feel this. And so then what happens in the brain is that it says, I understand it. And when as human beings we understand something, it is then less frustrating for us. And it then allows us to say, what am I going to do with this?
Okay, so we want to notice it, try and put a name to it. And that's the beginning to us. Like you said earlier, the brain likes consistency and certainty. So by identifying, noticing, naming, then we're kind of allowing our brain to go, oh, okay, maybe to engage curiosity,
Yeah. Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And what's the data? What's this
Mm.
emotion trying to tell me?
Curiosity. It's the answer to everything, isn't it?
Is the answer
Really?
to everything. In fact, it was interesting when, my children were born, and I've always been a very curious person, and I've known that it's kind of led me to grow in so many ways. And the one thing that you kind of wish for your children is that they have this curiosity, and curiosity leads to growth, and then growth leads to so many other things. And fundamentally, I didn't know it at the time, but as I say, my research led me to finding out what it was that I was wishing for with this curiosity and this ability to connect with people. And um, it was emotional intelligence. So
Mm.
it came around full circle. They were the ones that kind of started me on this journey, because I wanted to really, you know, model and give them the best start. And then now when I think about it, that's what I actually wished for.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And I do think parenting, leading, emotional intelligence is not about having the answers. It's about asking the questions.
100%. And it is like that coach approach.
Mm.
And the leader ultimately is a coach, the leader is a coach. And I think that parent as a coach, uh, anybody really, friend as a coach,
Friend,
it's
partner.
jumping in and telling. It's
Mm.
and that's really hard to do because we like to fix things, as you said.
And we're
um,
always right, especially when we're a parent or a wife.
It's so difficult. But we know that if we take that approach of
Mm.
asking, listening, asking, connecting, I would say is really the way forward.
The way forward. Is there anything that all leaders should, is there a book that you recommend? Is there a source of information that you suggest everyone should, all leaders should be across?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what I would say, I mean, there's a great book that touches on many things that I've just touched on. It's you know, not too hefty either, very simple. It's The Vital Signs by Josh, who you mentioned earlier. And I think that's a great book to start off with. I think the other wonderful resource is go to the 6 Seconds website. There's so much free information there, case studies,
Mm.
around organizations and leaders that have utilized emotional intelligence. We've got tools on there. So I would say what I just said to you when you asked me that question about where would you start, go and look at the interactive Pluchic model. Start playing
Mm.
with that. That's a model of 8 core emotions with higher and lower intensities, and you can click on it and it will tell you what is the meaning of that. What's a similar emotion to this? What does it mean? What's the message? And then it has click through links to take you down that rabbit hole of learning more and more and more. But it's a great place to start. Yes.
Amazing. We will link it. It's in the caption.
Yeah.
Um, okay, anything that we've missed, anything that you would want to add? I feel like we've covered a lot of bases, but anything else?
Just, I think the thing to remember is whatever your starting point is, if you choose to become more emotionally intelligent, to have the impact that we've just discussed together, you can do it. You absolutely have the ability to do it. And you're the expert in yourself. And it's just taking these competencies and integrating them into your life. But ultimately, it is about choice.
Mm.
As I said earlier on, we can either profess to know everything and be the greatest leader on the planet, or we can say, no, I don't know it all. And I'm just going to start to improve in this area of emotional intelligence. No matter how long you've been doing it, there is always room for improvement. But
Mm.
whatever level you're starting at, you can do it. Absolutely.
It's almost the minute that you make the choice that this is something that you're ready to grow, you automatically become more emotionally intelligent just by choosing to be more emotionally intelligent, right?
Do you know that is so interesting because I think people who engage in our certifications or organizations that come along and say that they want to do this, they're already at the stage where they're saying, yes, we can learn, yes, we can grow, which is that self-awareness piece of the model.
Mm.
um, I always used to joke and say the people that actually were involved in my research, they're the people that said they were really excited about it, said, yes, I want to do this because I want to make a positive impact. They're already kind of there. It's the people that I really felt like going around going, do you want to be involved in my research? The card or something that, it's
Mm.
harder with, but you can do what you can do
Yeah.
and know that you can enhance, and it's absolutely worth all the effort. It's not easy, but it's
Mm.
worth all the effort if you want that great well-being, relationships, to have that impact that you intend to have, and to sit back at the end of your days, whenever that is, whether it's today, tomorrow, or in 60 years time, to say, I was intentional, I lived a fabulous life and made a positive impact on the people around me.
Mm. And I learn something new every day.
Me too.
Right? That's got to be it. Learn something new every day. And actually, my dad always says a 20-minute belly laugh every day is also essential,
Oh,
which
absolutely. And Annabelle
learn
Jensen,
something.
our president, she says that too, similar thing, but and it is, I think, really very important as well. Yeah.
Well,
Great recipe for a great life.
yes, absolutely. We've just solved all the world's problems.
We
We
have.
could have done this
Now,
ages ago.
now we need to go around giving all these individuals that we're thinking of these little cards
Yeah.
and say, hey, come along. And then we may solve the world's problems.
Yeah, yeah, we'll be busy. It'll
Yeah.
take us the rest of our days. But thank you so much. I'm so grateful to you for coming and sharing your remarkable wisdom. I think you really do take something that can be such a challenging topic to articulate and to communicate clearly, but you make it so accessible. So thank you so much. And you heard it here first, folks. Sue's already said she'll come back. So I'm going to hold you to that. But thank you so much for your time today. I'm incredibly grateful.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been absolutely delightful, and it's just been like chatting to a friend. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone at home for listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day.